Okay, this is December the 15th, 2010. My name is Connie Mason. This is an oral history interview with Miss Sarah Page. And Miss Sarah, thank you for coming down today on such a beautifully cold day.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
And I know it's a busy time of year, December, but we're so glad you wanted to come and be with us and talk with us today. First of all, let's just say your full name.
Sarah Elizabeth Hanson Page.
Hanson. And that's
Hanson, that's my maiden name.
H-A-N?
S-E-N.
S-E-N, Is that Norwegian? Or?
Yes, my paternal grandparents were first-generation Norwegian immigrants.
Wow.
My grandfather came over here, and he had been sailing on the North Sea. He was rescued somehow by the Coast Guard and came to America and got his citizenship papers and sent back for they were not married at that time. My grandmother was living in Drammen, Norway, and so he sent for her, and they came into the port of Savannah, and I have their marriage license in 1897, I think it is. And I thought that was interesting that I had the certificate of marriage from Savannah, and it was a port of entry at that time, and I didn't even know that. So I have a lot of Norwegian background, and then my mother's roots go to Lukens.
Lukens Island.
Lukens Island, as she always called it, although we know it's not really an island.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But any of the old people say Lukens Island. So I never went to Lukens when I was a child, but I've been back to all the, Mother's Day reunions and heard lots of family stories.
Now, I guess the first boundary of Lukens Island, let's see, there's Turnagain Bay on the eastern side, and what's the creek on the western side?
I don't really know. I know my grandmother, my great-grandmother's, this would be my mother's grandmother, came from Turnagain Arm. Is that what it's called? Turnagain Bay.
Turnagain Bay,
I lived in Alaska, so there's a Turnagain Arm up there.
Oh, how about that?
But anyway, she was a Pittman, Sarah Pittman, from Turnagain Bay. And
now, she was related to Bill Mason?
Right. So
we're related.
We are. Okay. See, if you look far enough, everybody down here is related. Well, the way that relationship is, let's see, my grandmother, who was born at Lukens, had 4 daughters, Cora, Eva, Ida, and, oh Lord, I forgot the other one. And so Aunt Ida had 2 daughters, and William Mason married Thelma.
Thelma, that's right.
Yeah. So that's how the William Mason
connection
is. It was by marriage, but
the only time I went to Lukens, I went with Bill Mason, and Mr. Tosto took us over to the island on his boat, and there was a real rickety dock there at the time. He was going over to fix Sarah Pittman's gravestone. It had broken in half.
Okay, well that would have been my great-grandmother.
It had broken in half. And he went over to fix it. And so I was over there just to go because I had never been. And we had just got to the island when a jet came not 3 feet above the water.
Right.
And I saw it before I even heard it. And when the sound hit me, I thought I would die. I said, well, if we had been out there, we'd have been killed. So that was my introduction to Lukens. But what a fascinating place to have grown up in. I know you heard stories about Lukens.
Oh, well, I've heard lots of stories about you could tell from just seeing that spot. It's so beautiful. It's on a high bluff, and then those beautiful oak trees where the cemetery is. And then the little village of Lukens was just, scattered out, sort of like Portsmouth, but not nearly as extensive. You know, they had like the one little store which had the post office in one end, and the one-room school, which, you know, that was all 12 grades. And most of their trade was really, I think with Newbern, a lot of the trade was with Newbern because it was just easier to go by boat to Newbern than it was.
It's right on the Neuse River.
Right.
You're right at the mouth there.
Right. But they talked so much about the beauty of the place and the sandy shore and the water being so clear, and just that sense of community where it's such a small place and most everybody was related. And the children just had free run of the place. There was no fear of anything. It was just an idyllic life, if you don't count the mosquitoes.
If you don't mind them, it's a great life.
Now, I've heard some of my mother's cousins say it wasn't an ideal life. It was a terrible life. It was hard. It was isolated. You know, we didn't have window screens, and we suffered in the summertime. You know, when the poor little babies were laying there and
getting eaten alive.
Yeah, have to put what's that, netting and stuff all over them. But some of the same customs, I guess, from, you know, most of these isolated coastal communities were, like the women would sprinkle the floors with sand, you know, and scrub the floors with sand. They were, for the most part, very meticulous housekeepers. That didn't pass down through the generations.
No, I can tell you that didn't happen.
But very self-sufficient. My great-grandfather was an eel fisherman. And he was crippled. His name was Charlie Edwards, and I don't know if he had rheumatoid arthritis, but he was crippled from an early, you know, from a young man. But he literally would crawl down to that boat and set those eel pots. And they had the 4 girls, and then they had 2 boys, and he provided a living, you know, for that family of 6. Plus they, you know, had a garden, and they grew their vegetables, and they had cows, they had cattle. And
now, didn't Miss Dolly Caraway talk about Charlie Edwards in one of her books?
Probably.
I think she did. But I don't remember that particular fact about him.
Yeah, he was,
wow.
I have one picture of him, and he was a small man, but you could tell he was bent over, but they said he just had the most wonderful personality. He was just really, really sweet and kind to everybody. And Mama Sade, that would be my great-grandmother, she was a little bit of a different temperament.
Opposites attracted?
Maybe so, but she was a real leader in the community. And she was... in fact, they said that sometimes she actually went out and settled disputes sometimes between men, you know, that might have had a little bit too much to drink, or, you know, some problem over.
She was a mediator.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was also very good with, she wasn't really a midwife, but she would be the one that they would have called if somebody were sick. And what I find really interesting is that she was growing herbs and using herbal remedies before. Well, I guess that's what they relied on. But some of my favorite stories are that she grew garlic for the high blood. You know what that would be? High blood pressure. And then 2 of her other herbs that she liked to grow were, she called it sweet basil, and sweet marjorie, and that would be marjoram.
How about that?
So I love that little, it's such a picturesque thing.
Absolutely.
And I asked my mother one time, I said, well, what did she do with the basil and the marjoram? And she said she never used that in her cooking, but she liked to just smell it. It was, I guess, you know, and herbs are very...
aromatic.
Yeah. Maybe she needed that little uplift in something.
She could have.
Yeah.
Maybe she made tea out of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but That's great.
Oh, and then another story I've heard. Now, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but they said that one of her remedies was putting a collared leaf on somebody's head for a headache. Have you heard that?
I have heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, one of the village healer up at Portsmouth would do that. Take a cold collared leaf and tie it around your head. And I would tell people, I said, you would tell them it was better just to get the collar leaf off your head.
By the time it sat there in the hot sun a little while, or in the hot summertime, it would probably get smelling like a collar.
Probably. But there's no telling what kind of enzyme reaction it had.
Well, true, and it could have just been very cooling and soothing. Mm-hmm. But I love those stories about how they lived, And then one of my mother's cousins, the only one that's still living, Cleta Rose, she lives in Bridgeton. But she talked about how Pa Charlie, they had a little, I don't know what kind of measurement it would have been, but it was a little can, like a tin can. And he knew exactly how many oysters that they needed to open to feed their family. When that can was full, then that was supper.
Oh.
So I just thought that was, just such a neat little story to picture.
Do you know where the can is?
No, I'd love to know.
Oh, man.
Now, I do know that his chair, Pa Charlie's chair, is in Oriental. Actually, it's at Bill Mason's house. Have you ever been to Bill Mason's house, the Rock House?
The Rock House, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I went there once, and then after both of them died, I didn't know who got the house.
Well, his daughter June has the house, and the chair, it's a little wicker chair. It's small. I've seen it. It's not as small as a child's chair, but it is small because, he was a small man, and then he was hunched over. But they said after the hurricane of 33, that chair, it washed away, about everything washed away in Lukens. But somebody found that chair weeks afterwards, and they knew who it belonged to because nobody else had a chair like that. And they brought it back, and now June Mason Tingle has it at the house there.
How about that?
So,
what a great story.
Yeah.
I'd love to go get a picture of that. Is June there all the time?
Yeah, she lives in the house, and she's I don't know if she's legally blind, but I think she is. She has macular degeneration.
Was that what her mother has?
She did. Thelma had it too. But she's very willing to talk. I'm sure she would love to, talk to you and show you the chair, and she has, memories about all of that too. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, you didn't teach on Lukens, did you?
Oh no, I'm not that old.
I didn't think so. No.
But the school closed in was it 38?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I've got it someplace in my notes. But they said that the reason, well, there were several reasons for the decline of Lukens. Bill Mason always said, and Tom Tosto did too, that the school, when the post office and the school left, and the church, well, that's your three important institutions in any community. And so, but the population had declined to the point that they couldn't hire a teacher anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's when, most everybody.
What denomination of church was it on?
That was a Free Will Baptist church.
Free Will Baptist. That's great. I'll need to maybe look in the records there.
And that church is still very active on the South River side. Edwards Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Tosto goes there.
Chapel. I bet you they've got some of their records.
I think they do.
Mm-hmm.
And Connie, that Eloise Blair Collins is my first cousin, don't you?
No.
You didn't know that?
No, I did not know that.
Well, if you want a wealth of information on Lukens, she is the family historian. And she has a room upstairs in her.
Is she in Newbern now?
Yeah, she's in Newbern. But
and what's her last name now again?
Collins, Collins. You know, her new husband is the one who moves houses.
Right.
Jimmy Collins.
He actually came down to my mother's house one time and said, "You taught my wife how to play guitar."
Yeah, that's right.
I said, "Who's that?"
The family kids Eloise about having this old fish box with all the family history in it. And that's what she says. I've got to go up and get my fish box out. But she's got a wealth of information, and unfortunately there's not a wealth of pictures. But, you know, she has more information about Lukens than just about anybody I could.
Right. Well, I'll have to get up with Eloise. Maybe after Christmas.
Yeah. See, her father and my mother were brother and sister.
Okay.
So that's how.
So you're first cousins.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. She's one of my favorite people. And I haven't seen her in years since she moved up there.
Yeah, I just talked to her this morning on the phone, and this is kind of off the beaten track, but that was my grandparents had a large family. There were 8 or 9. Eloise can tell you about all this. But my grandmother from Lukens, and grandfather were married at Lukens, or Beaufort, I can't remember which. But then they moved to Newbern. So there were like 3 of the children that were born at Lukens, and the rest were born in Newbern. But my grandfather died in the flu epidemic of 1918 and left my grandmother with, I think it was 7 or 8 children to raise. The youngest one, well, my mother was 2 years old, so she doesn't remember. And then there was one under her. So,
goodness.
But my grandmother, my Lukens grandmother who moved to Bridgeton, now that was one strong woman, because she kept that family together, and there was no welfare. In fact, my mother would tell the story of a couple of rich ladies from Newbern came out there and wanted to adopt a couple of the children. And my grandmother said, "I don't have any children that would be up for adoption." And they lived in some pretty poverty-stricken, but they never went hungry. She had a huge garden, and
always something on the table.
Yeah, so that's just, you know, it's just neat that Mama Sade from Lukens was so strong, and then this daughter Ella, my grandmother's name was Ella, and I've just always thought that she had to be very, very strong to have held that family together like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the mosquitoes to Lukens.
Yeah.
Was there, besides netting, was there any other things that they would do?
Well, they used the pots. What do you call it?
Oh, the smudge
pots. Yeah, where they burn the pine knots, I guess.
Was there any kind? Was it a special pot, or just anything they had to put?
I really don't know. I've never seen one.
Yeah, I haven't either. So.
I don't imagine they would use their iron wash pot or cooking pot. So they probably just maybe had some old tin can or something.
Just something to make that smoke.
Yeah, and don't you know that smell good?
I heard the Indians used to use bear grease, and they would put it all over them. But I don't know if I could stand that either.
I just don't know how they stood it. I just don't.
Well, they went to bed at dark.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I remember as a child when we didn't have air conditioning, and so in the summer we had screens, but there was the most bug life around, you know, where on the ceiling where the where these things and things that I don't even know the name of, never saw such animals in my life, you know. And you never turned your light on in your bedroom. You always, you know, had a light out somewhere else so that all the bugs would go out there, and then you close the door and turn the light off.
Yeah,
you know?
I can remember Mother saying, "Turn that light off. The bugs will be coming in."
Yeah, yeah. So we have a rich heritage in bugs. But so you grew up where?
In Newbern.
In Newbern.
Well, I was born in Bridgeton. I was born at home in Bridgeton. And then my family moved to out on the old Cherry Point Highway when I was in the 3rd grade to take care of my grandparents. My Norwegian grandparents had a big house in Bridgeton. It was one of the first really nice, big, kind of Victorian houses that was built in Bridgeton. And but as they became older, they bought a little cottage out on the old Cherry Point Highway. Mm-hmm. And so my mother and dad, they were getting old and feeble, so they decided, well, my daddy decided to move out there to take care of his mom and daddy. And it was a rather traumatic move for my mother because mother and daddy had just finished building their house or remodeling their house in Bridgeton. And we moved into this old station house. It was a filling station, and it had an oyster bar in it at one time. Our living room had been a dance hall at one time.
Oh, I know she was thrilled to go.
And it was dirty, and and then they just had to start over. There was no indoor plumbing. Now, I was in the 3rd grade when we moved out there. And so, Daddy got a bathroom in there and turned it into a nice home, but it was a work in progress, forever. But they took care of my grandparents until they died. And, that's just sort of the way people did back then.
Oh, yeah. I still think people still do that, too.
Right.
But it...
But I had a wonderful childhood there because our property went from the old Cherry Point Highway all the way to the Neuse River. Mm. So I lived in the river in the summertime. And Daddy took us all, there were 4 of us kids, and he took us down there and taught us how to swim when we were very young. And Mother let us, after we did our chores in the morning, she more or less let us have the run of the river. Mm-hmm. So it was a great childhood.
Did you eat from the river?
Oh, I love to go crabbing with a line. And I don't know. I think neither one of them were big fishermen, but my mother loved saltwater fish because of her Lukens background. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember eating fish out of the river.
Now, what did you put on the end of that line to get those crabs?
Oh, an old chicken neck, usually. She'd go to the store and buy some old chicken necks or a back, or she'd save them up, and then we would. And you take 2 nails and a piece of line, and we used 2 big old nails and just wrapped it around there and tied it, and rowed a little skiff out there and would sit there very happily all day.
And when you pulled the line in, did you have a dip net? Is that what you?
Yeah.
To get it into the boat, get them into the boat.
And you pull it in real slow, so you trick them and keep them holding on, and then you dip that net under them and get them real quick.
There you go.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the term chicken neckers?
No.
That's they used to call the tourists that would come down here to go crabbing chicken neckers.
Really?
Because they use chicken necks to go crabbing. And what was the other term? It seemed like there was another one. But anyway, I remember a friend of mine used to use. He would go squirrel hunting, and sometimes if he didn't have any chicken, he'd get a squirrel carcass. He says they like squirrels too.
Oh yeah. Well, I think a crab would eat about anything.
Yeah.
I will tell you, my Norwegian grandfather said he would never eat a crab as long as he lived because being in the Coast Guard, he pulled in too many bodies.
Yeah. Well, there used to be a tradition here that a month after somebody had been missing at sea, they wouldn't eat crabs.
Is that right? Yeah. I never heard that.
Yeah, because they were afraid that
they had
were taken, so they didn't. They would forego. But and that was, I think I heard that up in Portsmouth. That was one of the things they told me up there. So did you have an oyster lease? Do you do any oystering in the river? Or?
No, we always had an oyster roast at Christmas. And
tell me about that.
Well, my dad would. He had a big old shop out in back of the house with a tin heater, and he built up a big fire in there, and it was always freezing cold, or it seemed like it. That made it more special. And he would take, I think, tow sacks and put the oysters. I think he put the oysters right on top of the tin heater, and then put the tow sacks, steamed them over them, and steamed them. Mm-hmm. And we'd stand around and with our oyster knife and our little bowl of butter and a Pepsi.
That's right.
And I still have my dad's oyster knives, which I think is so neat because they're real old and they're fat handled, and they have a big H carved in every one of them.
That's great.
Yeah.
And with the kind with a real skinny blade?
Yeah, real skinny. Mm-hmm. And it's a real good metal. Yeah. You know, it's not this old stainless steel stuff.
Right. And I questioned somebody one time because I was used to the fat handle and the skinny blade, and now what I call a clam knife is what everybody says is an oyster knife, and no, that's not it. And I asked somebody one time why they weren't using those, and they said that, well, it wasn't sanitary. Wood, the wood handles and the blade would get rusty.
We have the little thing that holds the blade in there is brass.
Yeah. And
my goodness, well, that's
isn't that terrible? That's
think tragic. About how many thousands people have eaten oysters with those things and
never got sick. Did you ever eat oysters any other time besides, what was it, Christmas you said?
Yeah, sometimes Mother would get some and she would fry those. Mm-hmm. And I liked them steamed a lot better or roasted a lot better than fried. Mm-hmm. But they were delicious because they were always fresh. Somebody that had been to the coast would bring them to her. Mm-hmm. And my dad could open oysters really well. Mm. He had worked in an oyster bar.
Oh, so he was a shucker.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he knew how to do that. And he was very particular about no pieces of shell or anything like that.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Did you eat the little baby crabs?
Oh, they're my favorite. I could eat a bowl full of them right now.
My Aunt Mary was the crab lady. We always gave her those crabs.
Now, I heard a name for those the other day. Have you ever heard a name for those little pink crabs?
I heard pea crabs, but
it was something neater than that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to find out.
Well, if it bubbles up, just give a holler.
Yeah. But I do love those things.
Mm. Well, let's see. So you grew up on the river, mm-hmm. and it was a great childhood. And at that time, were you expected to just get married and have a family, or were you going to have an occupation? Or?
Well, I was born in 1940, so and graduated from New Bern High School in 1958. So it was at that period where more girls were going off, but it was mostly for being a teacher, a nurse, or a stewardess. A lot of the girls went to Washington, D.C. to work as secretaries. But I had just always wanted to be a teacher because I don't think it was just because the choices were few, but I just...
That's what you really
loved. Yeah, I love to read, and I love children, and I had a really awful teacher in the third grade, and I made a commitment that I was going to be a teacher, and I was not going to be like Mrs. Hardesty. I was going to be kind and nice to my children. So I always lived up to that. I really did.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And so how long did you teach?
Well, I taught the 1 year here at Harkers Island in 1962, mm-hmm. and then I got married and we went to Alaska, and I taught 8 years up there.
Oh, whereabouts in Alaska?
We started out in Seward, Alaska. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were there, we moved up there right after, we drove the Alaska Highway more or less for our honeymoon. And so we were there in 1964 when they had the devastating earthquake.
What do they call it?
The Good Friday.
Juno?
No, it was they call it the Good Friday earthquake because it happened on Good Friday, but it was, I forget what the number is on the Richter scale, but it's the largest.
Recorded?
Yeah.
Wow.
And there were 16 people killed in that little town where we lived in.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so we're back after turning over the tape and going through. We have found out that Miss Sarah is also a songwriter, parody songwriter for Christmas, and she has written "Oh Collard Pot," and we might be reciting that in an instant when we get some copies made, and we'll put that in the file.
That would be great.
Oh man! And if you wouldn't mind, I will give you credit. I'll sing it at Christmas.
Oh, I'd love it. I would love to hear you sing it.
Oh, well, and I apologize today. I'm just getting over this sinus stuff, so I haven't even sung one Christmas song this year, which I cannot believe. It's been an unbelievable year. But anyway, but we're going to back up to the time you taught on Harkers Island.
Okay, good.
Was it a big transition for you to come and to move into this community from Bridgeton?
Not really. I had, visited Harkers Island a few times, and I just fell in love with it the first time I saw it. I loved the live oak trees, the way the windswept look. I loved riding down to the end of the island, looking at the lighthouse. And at that time, in 1962, it was still an island. It's an island today, but it just had such character. There were all the fish houses. There were no palm trees. I don't think there was a single palm tree on this island.
No, they're not.
There were probably no houses over 2 stories. Mm-hmm. The summer people, there were a few camps, down here at the east end of the island, little trailers and cottages. But there were none of the big houses like have come in here now. Mm-hmm. And it was a very close-knit community. And I will tell you that it did take me a while to gain their confidence.
Exactly, yeah.
In fact, I think some older gentleman on the school board saw me coming onto the island in my little car to teach school, and he said, "My Lord, what in the world is it coming to when they send a young'un to teach our young'uns?" So,
I love it.
And then my first day of school, I will tell you about that, because being right out of East Carolina, the wonderful experimental classroom, the open classroom I was in with a wonderful supervising teacher, I was sent down, or I chose to come here, and I was put in a room of 31 first graders who had never had kindergarten, not one of them. The closest thing they'd had to any formal structure in their life was Sunday school. Mm-hmm. So I was a little bit nervous that first day, and but I didn't know what I was in for, because not only did I have 31 little students sitting there patiently waiting for me, but most of the mothers came to school with their children that day. And I have since learned that was sort of a custom, that they brought the first day of school for the first graders, because this was the first time that these children had been out of the nest. And so they had their chairs, lined up around the classroom.
Well, that wasn't intimidating.
No,
was it?
And I'm sure that some of them, really wondered what this little blonde dingbatter, I don't think they even used that word then, but, it was, they wanted to make sure I was going to treat their children fine. Mm-hmm. So I got up there and made my little spiel about, children, we're going to have the most wonderful year, and I have a nice surprise for you. Everybody gets a new box of crayons today. And this little boy, Kim Hallis Lawrence, says, "Here's what you can do with your old crayons." And he took them and
threw them up in the air. Oh, my
So
God.
all bedlam broke loose. The other children knew about Kim, and there was nothing wrong with Kim except he was 100% boy. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want anything to do with that schoolroom. So anyway, I got through the first day, and the next day when I walked in there, Kim's mother was coming down the hall, pulling him and dragging him, and he was crying, "I'm not going in there, I'm not going in there." So that went on for several days. I hope it's all right to tell these personal stories.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
He knows the story.
Yeah.
But anyway, he finally came about the 6th or 7th day of school. I walked down the hall expecting him to be pitching the fit as usual, and he was sitting in his desk just like a little gentleman. And I said, well, Kim, I'm so glad you're here with us today. So I asked his mother that evening, I said, what changed Kim's mind about school? And she said, his granddaddy told him if he didn't go to school and behave himself, he was calling the sheriff. So that's what it took for Kim.
Well, the grandparents know best, don't they?
But after 2 weeks of teaching down here, I went home for the weekend. And I told Mother and Daddy, I said, I'm not going back down there. I'm not going. And they said, oh, yes, you are. You know, you've worked, and we've worked for you to get 4 years of college. You're going back. Mm-hmm. So, but I tell you, it was not easy. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't so much, the children weren't bad or anything, but I didn't have a teacher's aide. To go to the bathroom, I had to go next door and get Miss Mabel to watch my class. And it was kind of, it was a
31
6-year-olds.
Yeah, that's
a
lot.
A lot. But by Thanksgiving, I had them, pretty much under control. Had my little reading groups going. And they were getting used to me, and I was getting used to them. The parents had decided I was all right, and I'd made friends with several of the mothers. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, it was a wonderful year.
That's great.
Yeah.
Where did you live on the island?
I lived with Miss Sudie Guthrie. And Miss Sudie, they say if you had Miss Sudie Guthrie in the 5th grade, that you're a true Harkers Islander, because she taught about everybody in the 5th grade for years. Mm-hmm. And she was a wonderful lady, lived about midway the island, had a nice home there, and she rented out a room. Now, it had been my idea that I wanted to come over here and get my own little apartment or house or something, but somehow Mother found out that Miss Sudie took in wayward girls. She thought that might be a better plan. But Miss Sudie and I got along fine, and I learned a lot from her because she was,
Was she not teaching at that time?
Yeah, she was teaching.
She was still teaching.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And she was a serious, old-fashioned teacher, so I learned a lot, about her work ethic and all that.
Class discipline.
And it was kind of fun living with her because she was, we shared the cooking, and she could cook the best fish of anybody I ever have been around in my life. Mm. The reason they were so good probably is because after school, if we were going to have fish, she would go to the fish house, and she had taught every one of those boys at some point in their life. And so she would just say, I want a good, fresh trout. And they knew better than to give her anything that wasn't fresh. And she didn't do a thing to that fish, but just, they'd clean it for her. And it was just so fresh. And then just put a little cornmeal, salt and pepper on it, and have that black iron skillet just as hot as she could get it, and put it in there. And it's so fresh it would, flop. I mean, the muscles relax, yeah. Right. And my mother had always kind of overcooked the fish, but Miss Sudie just cooked it perfect. It was juicy and flaky. And her cornbread was to die for.
It was a fried pan?
Lacy cornbread.
Oh,
and that's the first time I had ever had it.
Did she use a regular cast iron, or was it one of those no edge cast iron?
I think she did it right there in that same
that she fried the
skillet
fish in.
That she fried the fish in. But you had to get that cornmeal just right, real thin, Mm-hmm. And when you put it in there, it would splatter, and that's what makes that lacy edge on it.
Oh. I've been trying, I do experiments. I've been trying to make real good iced tea, and I've been trying to make lace cornbread. and just dough in general, and light rolls. Now, my cousin can make the best light rolls, and I can watch him. He does a great job, and when I try to do it, it doesn't work out. So I make the Ellie Mae Clampett version. But we're working on it. But, yeah, that sounds good. Miss Sadie's fish sound good, too.
Sooty.
Scott,
yeah,
sorry.
Sooty, uh-huh.
So you learned something from her, too. That's great.
Yeah.
Were you single at the time?
Yes, I was, my fiance was at North Carolina State, and
so you were engaged.
Right, we were engaged, and he was, talking about going to Alaska, and I liked it down here so well, I was really having second thoughts, because I loved it here, especially after I found out you could go over on the banks and get in an old jalopy and ride up and down. That was wonderful. And, but anyway, we had made the commitment to each other. And so, but I was still dragging my feet. My mother was trying to plan the wedding without much cooperation from me. But Jim called me one night, and he said, "Sarah, I've got an application here for a job. I've been accepted for a job as a junior forester in Seward, Alaska, but there's a line here and it says married or single. What do you want me to put in that line?"
That's a great story.
He put me on the spot, didn't he?
He did.
So I made my choice. And
there over the phone.
Yeah. But I really loved it here, but I knew that my heart was with him and that I was going to go with him. But it was a struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in that year that you were on Harkers Island, you did love to go to the Cape.
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah. I had a couple of the parents, had camps over there. And so they...
Would they invite you to come?
Yeah, they'd invite me to come. Emma Guthrie, I think her husband's named Garland. They're still alive. And so they invited me to go with them, and I went over and spent the night, and they had one of those old jalopies, and we rode up and down the beach, and just, no restrictions. It was pure, everything, freedom. And
was it at the Cape and not on Shackelford?
It was at the Cape.
It was at the Cape. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember being around the lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one, in fact, it was Kim's mother, Kim Lawrence,
mm-hmm.
Rosemarie Lawrence. She, one day she said, "Sarah, do you want to go to Beaufort after school?" And I said, "Well, sure." Well, I thought she meant in the car. And she said, "Well, meet me down at the landing." Well, I thought that was the grandest thing I'd ever seen, because her daddy had a big old boat, and not a fancy boat, a Harkers Island skiff with a big motor on it. And we took off and went to Beaufort, and went out, and I don't know what we did, got an ice cream or something, but it was just, such a way of life that I just...
Right.
I didn't know you could just get in the boat and go places.
Go to town.
Yeah, go to town. Go to town, literally.
What was the biggest change that you've seen since coming back and in Harkers Island? I guess physically and I guess maybe as community.
Well, of course, the biggest change is all the waterfront property has been, more or less taken over by people from, they fall in love with it. They have fallen in love with it. You can't blame them. And, whereas the people that grew up here didn't build on the water. Very few of them had houses on the water. But then they came in, so the whole shoreline is just different. When I was here, you could walk from where Miss Sooty lived, all the way down to the point if you wanted to, and, by the fish houses and little cottages and the net spreads and the boats out there, just it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. But now it's like, it's just little parcels and they're so close together.
Yeah.
And when I'm out in the boat and look back at it, that's when I see what a awful difference, it is, just because Harkers Island was just so beautiful. Like when you came across the bridge, there were none of those houses there. It was just those beautiful trees and that sandy shoreline. And then when you came on the island, it was, just nice homes, adequate homes, but none of this. They just don't fit. They don't look like they belong here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All those Jamaican colors and
Yeah.
palm trees and
The palm trees I don't like when they have the most beautiful trees in the world here, the live oak.
Did you hear anything from your friends when you were in Alaska from Harkers Island about Park Service and what was going on down here? Did you hear anything?
A little bit,
And
I know that it was a very bitter time. I've heard of people that had camps over there that said they would never go back over there because they were so hurt at what had happened, and they felt like that their land had been taken from them. Their families had been going there for generations. I mean, their families could trace their roots back to there. So it was hurtful. Now, recently I have heard some of those same people say that they are glad the Park Service got it. And I'm glad the Park Service got it because we know what it would be like today if they hadn't.
Yeah, I actually saw plans for development around the lighthouse. There was a lighthouse drive, and there'd be houses all through there and a bridge. And
Oh, no.
so, yeah, but, it was a big change.
It was.
A big change. And
I can see why there was, a lot of bitterness and mistrust and it's just they just felt like they had been disenfranchised, I guess.
Yeah, could you tell, was there a big difference between, you talked about the physical beauty of the island. To me, you can't separate the people. If you can love the beauty of the island, but you got to love the people that lived here to really. I mean, I think the people really, define the place in some ways because they loved it, have lived in it, and it's their tradition and their culture that's here. Have you found a lot of that has changed since '62 when you were here?
Well, I haven't been involved in the community that much. I live in Smyrna, but what I see is that I don't think it's that close-knit feeling like we had. Like most of the moms were stay-at-home moms. The dads were fishermen. A few of them worked at Cherry Point. They were all interconnected, most of them were related, and they just had such a strong sense of community. Like the school, we had programs, we had the operettas and the PTA meetings. Well, I think the school is still pretty, active like that, but the school was a big thing, And
the operettas, is that something they would write themselves, or?
No, these were like little musical programs. The one I did was called The Wedding of the Flowers, and we had the little bride and the groom, and I think the bride was the lily of the valley, and the groom. It's a real cute little operetta, and it was songs and dancing and crepe paper costumes.
And the parents helped make that?
Oh, yeah, the parents, we had one mother who was a wonderful seamstress, and she did a lot of the costumes. And all the characters in this little operetta were flowers. So the boys were like sunflowers. And
was it hard to get the boys to be flowers?
No, they didn't have any choice in the matter.
I see.
You're going to be a sunflower. But, and then everybody turned out. That was a big production, at the end of the year. And that was the first and second grade combined on that program.
Did you feel like a lot of those kids were so musically gifted? Because, there seems to be a lot of artistic talent down east, and particularly music here on the island.
They did. They could sing very well, and I think they just. I don't know. I heard somewhere that the roses came out of the womb singing. Have you ever heard that?
No, but it makes sense to me.
Because the roses do have beautiful voices.
Gosh, yes.
Yeah.
And the roses are related to the Nelsons, I think. And
Yeah.
the Nelsons are.
They're pretty amazing.
The roses came out of the womb singing.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before. That's lovely. Well, I really appreciate you coming out today, and you've given us a wonderful interview. And if there's anything you'd like to say about Harkers Island that you haven't already said, or
Well, I wouldn't trade that year that I taught over here for anything. And you can see that I loved it so much that I'm back down here.
there you go.
And I followed Jim all over the United States. We lived in 8 different states, and he knew how much I loved it here. And he said when he retired that we would come back, not only for Harkers Island, but for my family in Newbern. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't live any other place on earth. I really wouldn't.
Well, it can't be any more heartfelt than that, Miss
No,
Sarah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie. I enjoyed it.